Hey everybody, welcome back to Laser Engraving 911. This is a huge video. Let me just say this right off the bat. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. It's all about engraving drinkware. Not just 20-ounce tumblers, but cups with handles, glassware, how to clean the cups, how to organize your cups when you're working, how to be more efficient, how to use Adobe Illustrator to prepare your artwork for those tumblers and cups. It's got everything in it. So I will not blame you at all if you use those timestamps in the description of this video to jump around to the part you need the most information on. That's what this video is all about. This is my masterclass on engraving drinkware that I was contracted to do by Epilog, and I'd like to give a special shout out to Epilog for allowing me to post this masterclass on my own channel to share with all of you. If you're interested in the Epilog machine or any of the Epilogs that I used in this masterclass, I'll list a link in the description below. And just so you know, this video is 90% about engraving drinkware and about 10% specific to Epilog. It really is about engraving drinkware with a CO₂ laser as a whole. So there is so much information in here that is relative no matter what system you have. So if that sounds like something you want to get into, then buckle up, get your pen and paper out, because we're about to get into some drinkware on Laser Engraving 911. Hey everybody, my name's Michael, and you probably know me from Laser Engraving 911. Well, today we're partnering with Epilog to bring you my masterclass on engraving cups. We'll cover everything from using the rotary tool from Epilog, setting up different kinds of cups in the rotary tool, secret tips and hacks, and I'll be using my Epilog 60-watt Edge CO₂ laser for all of the projects. But it's not just the rotary tool. No. We're going to be covering artwork prep. We're going to be covering efficiency. We're going to be covering how to deal with names and sizing on different cups, and some really cool workarounds to make sure that your logos and graphics look perfect on all these different cups. So if that sounds like something you want to get into, then buckle up, get your pen and paper out, and let's get engraving some cups with Epilog Laser. All right, so first things first, let's talk about the Epilog Rotary. I feel like I have a very intimate knowledge of this rotary, at least a decade's worth of knowledge about using this specific rotary. And here's a quick thing I wanted to point out. Just because we're using the Epilog and the Epilog Rotary for this masterclass does not mean that all of these different principles that we're going to talk about today are not relative to your rotary or your machine that you have. These are general tips and tricks, really good ones too, of how to get great engravings on cups. So keep that in mind. Let's talk about the basics of the Epilog Rotary. So what do we have here? So starting from this side over here, we've got our little hold down clamp, which is removable, which is nice. And you can slide this back and forth. And the job of this little lip clamp, hold down clamp, is to hold the lip of the cup against the next part we're going to talk about, which is the drive wheels. One of the things I wanted to point out as we're moving from this side to this side is if we take this rim drive clamp off, you'll notice there's a piece of plastic right in between these two drive wheels here. And that is actually a very smooth, I'm not sure if it's plastic or metal. I feel like it's Delrin plastic, but there's a very specific reason that that's there. That's actually so when you put a cup in there, you want to always butt your cups up against that, and it helps keep it running smooth. It's like a stop right there, and it's made out of a very smooth material, so that rim kind of rides against it. You always want to make sure when you put your cup in that you're touching that and then clamping it down. So little pre-tip there before we get into loading cups. All right, so we'll get this lip clamp back on there. That just sounds weird, lip clamp. But I mean, that's what it is. I don't know. I'm sure Epilog has a real name for it. Now, I am just pointing out things that may be obvious to you and that you may already know, but some of you may not know this. These are called the drive wheels. This is actually what's motorized and what's causing the cup to turn. So when you put a cup in here, this is holding it down against the drive wheels, and that's what's rotating the cup. These supporter wheels don't have any kind of motor in them. These are the only ones that turn, and that's important to know. They have two separate rings of rim drive wheels, and over here you have free spinning rotary reels. So this is what drives and rotates the cup on this side of the rotary unit. Next, we have the supporter wheels here, and they're docked on a very clever little scissor lift so you can raise and lower this to make sure that your cup is level, which we're going to talk about really soon. All laser engraving machines require the cup to be as level as possible to get clean, crisp engravings and stay in focus. It does go pretty high. I don't think I've ever brought it up this high before, but it does go pretty high. This is how you level your cup by adjusting this knob right here up or down using a level, which we'll talk about in a second. And then last but not least, you've got two little pinchy knobs back here, and this allows you to slide back and forth depending on how long your cup is or your cylindrical object. And then when you let go, it locks that in place. This is called a rim drive rotary. It's very different than a chuck style rotary that grabs, and Epilog has that available too if that's the kind of rotary you need. But what I use for cups is the Epilog rim drive rotary. So now that we've got the basics of the rotary set up, we'll move on to loading up different cups in the rotary. All right, so the first type of cup on our list on how to load into the Epilog rotary is going to be cups with handles, specifically camping cups, beer cups, any kind of mug with a handle, and most importantly, Stanley cups. Let me tell you a little story about Stanley cups. When these things were very popular last year, they're still pretty popular, but they were really popular. We were getting a lot of these, and we thought, because we had seen somewhere, that what we needed to do was remove the screws, take off the handle, so the handle wouldn't hit the rim drive on the rotary, because we don't have a chuck rotary for the Epilog. And then I kind of took a closer look at the rotary and I was like, I don't think we need to do that. So let me show you what I mean by that. So one of the things that you'll notice most of the time with cups with handles with the rim drive rotary is you put it in like you normally would. You're going to lift up the lip clamp. You're going to make sure it's butted up. You're going to slide your supporter wheels up. You're going to level the cup off just like you normally would. I'm using a long level here to make sure that it's nice and level, but you can also use a little spirit level like this. But just keep in mind, the longer of level you use, the straighter and more level your cup will be. So I'll leave that up to you. So you've got everything level, you've loaded the cup in, but look what happens when the cup's going to rotate. If you can see right here, when it goes, if you've got a big graphic, this handle is going to turn down and it's going to hit these wheels in the middle of your engraving process, and you do not want that to happen. So what we used to do, before I realized you could do this, we used to take out the screws of the Stanley, and then you don't have that issue because there's no handle there anymore. But the Epilog Rotary has a really cool trick that you can do, and I have used this ever since I figured this out. I'm going to show you. You see these drive wheels right here? These are actually two sets of wheels, and you can take the first set off. Yay! Some of you might know this. There's one, and sometimes you might need a pair of pliers to these little finger nuts that are in here, and you just unscrew the first set. And don't worry, you're not breaking your rotary, you're just modifying it. And then you just set those wheels off to the side, and guess what, folks? Now your handle will clear the wheels. Look at that, all the way. And you never have to worry about that again, and you don't have to waste precious hours taking off the handle of the Stanley. It's amazing. Since we have the Stanley loaded up here, and we're gonna load up lots of cups, I wanna show you something else that you need to be aware of. A lot of tumblers nowadays, depending on the cap style, have a screw-on cap, and that means that there's threads on the inside of the cup. And it just so happens that this lip clamp, somebody tell me how many times in the comments, how many times we said lip clamp in this video. Cup lip hold down, I don't know what to call it. Anyway, if you notice, no matter how much you can adjust this, this wheel is going to land inside of the threads. And sometimes those threads can be aggressive. And what it can do if it starts riding in those threads is it can actually scoot the cup down or cause the cup to turn not evenly. So I've always been kind of annoyed by that until a few years ago, where I made a modification to this part right here. Now, we don't have time in this video to show you how to do this step by step, but I will list a link in the description of this video where you can buy all the components to do this modification. Here is the original, and here is the modified version. And all these parts were very, very cheap parts. And what this does, it's amazing, is whenever you have cups that have aggressive threads right on the lip that you don't want that, what do we call it? The lip clamp? You won't want the lip clamp wheel. It just reaches all the way past that and still holds down your cup. I mean, that thing is way in there and it's still clamping down the cup nice and tight, and you don't have to worry about that little wheel catching on any thread. So there's a little hack for you. For Epilog Rotary users, you can build this yourself. I'll list you a parts list. It was very easy to do, but you will have to buy yourself an extra clamp because I always like to have two. Do still use this one very often, but I do put this on when I need it. So you will have to buy an extra one to make a modified one. All right, let's move on to the next cup. Let's go ahead and set up the mug. Once again, if we didn't remove that second set of wheels, this handle would hit those first set of wheels. So we just put that in there, lift up our clamp. We're gonna bring this all the way in. We have to drop this down because this is a different style of cup. We're just gonna bring it just enough in, about, a ½ inch in. And I noticed right away that this is not level. So I'm gonna make my adjustment here with the leveling wheel, and now it's level, and there it is. And we can check to make sure that our modification, it will not hit that. We're good. Trying to, but I didn't put it there. You see, I put that one in. So that's another thing to think about when you're doing cups. That's good. That was a happy accident. So I put the supporter wheels too far in. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's just enough on the cup to where these handles will clear both the drive wheel and the supporting wheel. And let's try one more with the handle. Here we go. We've got a beer mug. Let's take this off. On here, got to level it again. Every time you put a new cup in here, a new style cup, you have to level every single time, and you have to refocus every single time. Now you can really see how far that modified lip clamp reaches in. That's the running joke. And you can see that we just put this enough to support the back end of the cup, and then we can do a little test by rotating it through to make sure that that handle is not hitting those wheels. That's how you work with cups with handles on the Epilog Rotary, and there is a simple couple of hacks that you can use with your existing rotary to make sure that your cup handles never hit the drive wheels or any other wheels, and your engravings come out great. Let's move on to another style of cup. All right, next we're gonna talk about sports bottles. I'm just showing you all the hard ones first. We can just get these out of the way. They're not hard, they're just challenging, and there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. So, sports bottles, right? Powder coated, stainless, whatever. So you take off the lid and bam, look at that. Well, that's not very helpful because the diameter of this is, look, what are we gonna do? Because if I try to clamp that in there, that doesn't work because it's got this little step down. So we can't do it the same way that we do other kinds of cups because of this. This is never going to work. And even with our little extender reaching in there, it's still not going to work because we need the drive wheels to be on this part, not on this part. That would screw up the engraving and we'd have to do all kinds of math. And plus it's threaded, so it would go all wonky. So what are we going to do? Let me tell you. First things first, we don't need this. Can I say it one more time? We don't need the lip clamp. We're taking it off. So when I am doing these, here's what you gotta do. You gotta put these back on because we need lots of support. Just line up the screws. Remember, we only removed the second set of wheels on the drive wheels to do cups with handles, okay? We always want to leave these on for pretty much any other cup unless we're doing handles, unless you have a very, very specific reason for removing that second set of rim drive wheels. All right, so we got our regular rotary drive wheels back on. Everything's tightened down nice and tight. Now, back to this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually face it the other way. So we're gonna put the bottom of the cup on the drive wheels, and we're going to bring in the other end of the tumbler right there. We're gonna set our level on there. We're gonna make sure that that tumbler is level. Boom, it's nice and level. Now, you think that we're ready, and then we just focus and, we do our engraving. Remember, on the software, we'll have to flip our engraving going the other way, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So you think we're done, right? Well, not really. One of the things that can happen when you're doing bottles this way is that it can slip. Because this is not very heavy. The best way I found to deal with any kind of bottle where you can't clamp it anymore, because that lip clamp is very important for holding the bottle to the drive wheel. But we don't have that anymore. So what you need to do is weight down this bottle. And what I have found works really well is you can grab an old vitamin bottle and you can fill it with some lead shot or something really heavy. You can hear that in there. Any kind of weight that is the diameter that can fit through the bottle, you just slap that in there and put it right in the middle of each bottle before you start engraving. That will create enough weight to keep this sports bottle down heavy on the drive wheel so it never slips. I have different sizes for different diameter bottles, and I think this one's just filled with sand. I have this other metal tube that's got some weight to it for a bottle I worked on that had a very small opening. So you want to have different weights at different diameters that you can slip inside these bottles to keep them heavy on the drive wheel. Because they're a cylindrical object, they're not going to mess up the engraving or tumble around. So you want it to be a cylinder within a cylinder, and it will just roll in there as the engraving is happening. And then when you're done with each bottle, you just take that out, put the next bottle in. Don't forget to put your weight back in and set it down right there. So that's how I do sports bottles that have a step down lip that prevents me from clamping the bottle. Let's move on to the next style cup. All right, next, this one's pretty simple. Let's do this skinny tumbler, right? But what do I notice right away? What does it have on the inside? Threads. So I'm going to pick my extended lip clamp. I'm going to give a special award to anybody who actually watches this video, tells me how many times I said lip clamp. So I want that to reach in. I'm just going to lift that up, set that in there, bring in just enough to support the cup there, make sure that I'm level. Oh, that was already really level. And that one is done. These ones are very simple. Just watch out for those threads. Let's move on to the next one. Next, we've got the classic JDS 20-ounce tumbler. Guess what? No threads. Love that. Now, I could totally just leave this on, or I could use the other one, but since I already have this on, it's not going to hurt anything. I'm just going to set it in there, release the lip clamp, and then I'm just going to slide this here. Now, here's something to think about. This is a tapered cup, okay? This is not just a perfect cylinder. So I'm going to use the spirit level for this, just the small level. I'm going to make my level adjustment. And now we're level. One of the things to consider when working with any kind of standard 20-ounce tumbler, whether it's from JDS, is the taper here and how that can affect your engraving. And we're going to talk about that when I get into graphic design tips and tricks later on in this video. But it's just something to keep in mind. If you have an extreme taper or any kind of pint glass tapered cup, that can affect how your graphic will come out. But there's an equation that you can use to make sure that it comes out correctly. And also, since JDS likes to put these little rings at the bottom, you want to make sure, unless you specifically want to go over those rings, you want to make sure that you avoid engraving on that and keep this as your total working area right here and try to avoid this section right here. All right, what do we got next? Next, let's take a look at some glassware. So this is just a pretty standard wine glass. So a couple of things that you want to know about wine glasses is that sometimes, depending on how they're built, you may not be able to get it perfectly level. You will run into this, but you can get close. And this thing is bottomed out, like I can't go any lower. So right now I'm not perfectly level, but that's okay. This is what I would call close enough, and I've been engraving wine glasses like this for a while, even though they're not perfectly level and they come out just fine. But other wine glasses, especially when they get bigger or the stem is wider, you really want to try to encourage your customer to get more standard looking wine glasses than really ornate wine glasses, because you will run into an issue where you cannot even get close to level on wine glasses. But on standard ones, you're okay. So just remember, on standard wine glasses, if you can't get this perfectly level, but you're still in focus in the area that you're going to be putting the engraving, you're gonna be just fine. Next, let's take another type of wine glass that you can do on the Epilog Rotary, and most rotaries, is the stemless wine glass. And you can see that this is one of the practice glasses I had for a project I did earlier this week. And with this one, it's pretty simple. You're just gonna clamp it in there, and you're going to bring your support wheels up right to where it just rests on it right there. And this is where that clamping wheel comes really handy, clamping the lip of that down. And you're gonna put your level on there again. Once again, this is one of those situations. You can kind of back this out a little bit and try. The most important thing is you're not going to be able to drop this down low enough to get this perfectly level. But what you can do is adjust where the support wheels are and make it level that way. So right now I'm bringing in the support wheels, and then I locked it. And now, if you can see, we're perfectly level, and we're still supporting the glass right here. So you could totally do stemless wine glasses or stemless stainless steel powder coated tumblers just like this. Totally capable rotary, totally easy to do. All right, last but not least on our list of how to load up different cups here, we're gonna talk about the 40 ounce or the 30 ounce kind of classic tumbler that you see out there. And you see a lot of people doing full laser engraving wraps on these. And I think there's some confusion about where to focus on this, because if you notice, it has two planes. It has a higher plane and a lower plane. And we're going to talk about focusing when we're over at the laser. But let me show you how I load this up. So just like any other cup, it doesn't have any threads. So I'm just going to use my regular lip clamp. I'm going to bring this in and just put it right underneath it on the very edge right here. I'm going to get out my level, and I'm going to keep cranking it up until I see I am level. There we go, and we're level. Now, here's the scenario. You want to do a full wrap laser engraving all the way around this, but you've got this high focal plane and you've got a lower focal plane. So the question is do you want to focus here? Do you want to focus here? Where do we focus? Because we want to keep that laser power in focus the whole time, because we're doing the whole thing, right? So what I like to do for these kind of engravings is, and you can do this with a 2-inch lens, but I prefer to do it with a 4-inch lens, is I like to focus right in between, right there. I just level the cup and I focus not up here, not down here, but right here in the middle of the slope. So I split the focal point evenly, and I use a 4-inch lens, which is a little bit more forgiving when it comes to changing focal distances. If you don't have a 4-inch lens for your Epilog yet, I highly suggest you get it. It comes in handy in many, many scenarios, including when you need to work on curved surfaces or split the focus. So there's a little tip from me to you. Just level your cup, focus right in the middle of the slope, use a 4-inch lens, and you will have no problems with your full wraps on the 30-ounce cup, just like this. All right, and so before we move over to art preparation and how to prepare your art for all these wonderful cups that we just showed you how to load up, I want to quickly talk about taking care of your rotary tool. So the most important thing that you can do to take care of your rotary tool is keeping these wheels clean. And I like to do that with a little alcohol prep pad. I just wipe around the wheels periodically, get any dust, any grime off of them, because these rubber wheels are meant to be tacky and grippy, and that's very important. Over time, they can build up dust and other particulates, and they don't feel sticky fluffy or super rubbery anymore, and you want them to be grippy. So once in a while, every couple of weeks, just wipe them off with a little alcohol swab. I've been doing this for over a decade. I have never seen any cracking or anything from using an alcohol swab. It works, it's quick, it's easy. Take care of your rotary. It'll love you for it. Alrighty, well, here comes the computer part of our masterclass, where I am going to cover how I make my proofs for cups, how I size my graphics and prepare my graphics for cups or glasses or tumblers, whatever you want to call it, and then also share some tips and tricks along the way that will make your cups come out super pro and looking clean every single time. Let's get started with the first one, which is how I make my proofs. The first thing you're going to want to do when you open up your art program, whether that's Adobe Illustrator, Affinity, Canva, GIMP, whatever art program you have, you're going to want to make a mock-up for the customer, whether it's a B2B customer or it's individual work like I do here at my business. You can find plenty of cups, whatever the cup is that you're working on. You can find it usually on the manufacturer's website, a very nice front and back picture of it if you're doing both sides, or you can also just take a picture with your phone. And then what you pretty much want to do is remove the background, or if you can find a transparent PNG, even better. So as you can see, I've got my Yeti cup here and I've got this layer locked so it won't move. But more importantly, what I've done is I have taken the measurement of the top and the bottom of the Yeti cup, and I know that it's 7.1 inches tall. And I've made myself 12 by 24 art bed to represent my laser bed, just because that's how I like to make my proofs. And so this cup is sized appropriately. So now when I'm playing with different graphics and different logos, I can size them to actual size. And this is really important when you're making proofs for customers. You don't want to just drag in a picture of a cup, fill up the whole page, put a logo on it, but it's not a true representation of the size that their logo is going to be and the placement of where it's going to be. So making sure that you size the picture of your cup or tumbler or glass to whatever the actual size is in the proof is very important. I know it seems simple, but it's going to help the customer out and it's going to help you out in designing. Say the customer wants this pickleball logo right here, and this is what they've asked me to engrave on their cup. If I bring it in at the normal size, you can see that it's way too big for the cup. So like I said before, I like to keep my logos no bigger usually than 2.85 inches wide. So that's kind of like my standard. Obviously, if it's a smaller cup, I'll make it smaller. So what I do for the proof is I'll take their logo after I vectorized it, or if they sent me a vector, even better. And I'll change the color of it to, maybe this color right here. I can use my little dropper tool and I can change the color of that logo to more of how it's going to engrave. And then I'll bring it over to the cup. Say they wanted it on the front of the cup. Another tip is that when people bring you Yeti cups, always engrave their logo on the raised embossed side. That is the industry standard for a single logo on a Yeti cup. I never put it on the engraved side. You can see the silver logo down here because I feel like it's too busy. So I always put the logo on this side of the Yeti. So I'm just kind of sizing it. You can see right now I'm at 2.7. That looks good to me. About 2.7 inches. I'll kind of center it up there. Another tip for engraving logos on cups, which is what we're talking about, is I never, ever put the logo dead center in between the bottom of the painted area and the top of the painted area. I feel like unless the customer asks me to do that, I, of course, will do whatever they ask, but I always slightly weight it towards the top. I feel that's a more pro look, and that's something you should be doing too. So that is what I'm going to show them, just like that, of how their logo is going to look. I know it's at size, and now when they approve this logo, unless they need some changes, all I have to do is take this vector, clear everything else off the page, and it's already sized for me. So I'm never resizing again because I made my proof at size. So once I get it aligned right where I want, get it nice and centered and looking good, I'll get rid of anything else. It doesn't need to be on the screen. And sometimes I'll put a copy of their logo down here at the bottom and I'll put it back to black or however the original logo looked like. And that's it. It's really that simple. That's how I send my proofs to customers. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You don't have to put a bunch of measurements on the logo and all that stuff if you don't want to. If they request it, of course I'll add it, but it really gives them a true representation of what you're offering. So that's how you make a proof, or that's how I make my proofs here in my engraving shop for tumblers. Now let's move on to the next section, which is how to prepare certain kinds of artwork for certain kinds of tumblers. All right, now we're going to talk about what you're going to do with customer supplied logos that you get that you need to convert into a black and white vector, just like you see here. But what I see a lot of people doing when they're first getting started is, let's pretend that this is the logo that the customer sent you. And you're like, great, that's super clean, right? It's a vector. Look at all those clean lines. It's ready to go. That's what we want. We always want to be using vectors when we're doing cup engraving all the time. No point that you should ever be using PNGs, JPEGs, or any other format. SVG is also a vector. AI is a vector. We should always be doing that for maximum resolution and the fact that you can scale it up and down to infinity because it's a vector. So a little ramble there. You get this logo and a customer asks you to put it on the cup. No problem. So we're going to make our proof, right? And what do? We're going to take our little eyedropper tool over here in Illustrator, and we're going to turn that to silver because that's how it's going to engrave. We know that. And we're going to bring it over here and we're going to size it. We're going to put it in the middle, and you're like, great, that's good. And that's what you show the customer. That's not how the logo is supposed to look. That's an inverted picture of what they sent you, because you know that you have a dark foreground and a light background, and you're removing the dark foreground. So what you're going to be giving them is cool, and it's going to be ultra high resolution, but that's not how it's supposed to look, because you need to invert the image, because you know that you're actually, let's just make this easy, you're engraving in a white color or a silver color. You're not engraving in a dark color. So you have to invert the image, and there's ways to do this in Lightburn. There's ways to do this in Adobe Illustrator. You can do it in Canva, but you have to learn how to invert your logo. So here's how we do it in Illustrator. You can see I already have it finished right here. These are the steps that I take. Make a copy of this by holding down Alt and dragging, and then we're going to go to our Pathfinder tools. You're going to have to open up this window, and you're going to hit merge, and then you're going to hit unite, and that's going to slightly fill in that artwork. Then you're going to go to object path, offset path, and you're going to pick round, and you're going to offset it about 0.10. This is a preference. And then you're going to click OK. And now you have this weird blob shape, right? So we're going to smash that again by hitting merge and unite. And then let's see if we still, now we have a solid shape. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make another copy of this, not changing the size of our original graphic yet, right? And you're going to change the color of that to white, and you're going to go to Object, Arrange, Bring to the Front. And then we're going to align these two things using the alignment tool. First, I'm going to do my vertical alignment and then my horizontal alignment. And now I've put that white version of the logo on top of the black silhouette that I made of the shape. So you're going to highlight them both now, and you're going to hit trim. Then you're going to ungroup, select any white area in your logo, and then you're going to select same fill color. Whew, that was a lot of steps. But guess what? You can rewatch it. And then I'm going to group everything together. And just to make sure everything is correct, I'm going to hit merge, object, path, cleanup. Found that that cleans up all the nodes and stuff. And now what do we have? Now we have an inverted version of their logo, because we know we're engraving it on this black tumbler and it's going to engrave silver. So now let's take that logo, and let's take both of them actually. Take both of these. We'll color them in gray, or we'll use the dropper tool. We can do that too, that silver color. Now let's make sure they're both in the front of the art, and let's take the original one that we were going to do and that I see most people doing, and then we'll take the inverted one, and you tell me which one looks better. Right. So make sure that you're inverting logos so they don't look like negatives when you engrave them on powder-coated tumblers that have a dark foreground and have a silver background. Let's move on to the next tip. Are you ready to have some fun? All right. So many of you have either run into this before or you haven't run into this before, but when you have a customer supplied logo or a perfectly round logo of any kind, and you try to engrave it on a cylindrical tumbler, you're not actually going to get what you see right here. You're probably going to end up with something that looks like that. I'm exaggerating it, but you're probably going to get an egg-shaped logo when you're engraving on a regular tumbler if the logo is completely round.
I offer you a nice egg in this trying time.
It's not because you engraved an egg-shaped, it's because of something called a parallax effect. So you actually did engrave a circle on there, but because of the cylindrical object, it's going to end up looking to the naked eye like an egg. And there is a way to fix that. So the final look of what you're doing will look more like a circle or very close to it. So I've gone over this in another video, but we're going to go through it really quick here as another tip. So our original logo, this is the first thing you have to do is decide what size is the logo going to be. So I've decided that my logo is 2.5 inches. Okay, that's the circle. So it's 2.5 all around. Next, you want to measure the diameter of your cup, particularly the part of the cup that you're going to engrave. So I'm going to use my digital caliper. I'm going to measure the diameter. It's pretty much the same as up here too. So what I come up with, and I'm doing this in inches, the diameter of this cup on the top and right here is 3.4 inches. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 3.4 inches and move the decimal all the way to the left. And what we're going to do then is we're going to add 0.34 inches to the width of our logo without changing the height. So get out our little calculator here. We know that our original logo was 2.5 inches, and we're going to add 0.35 or 34 inches. And our new width of the circle, now we have to unlock the ratio to do this because we're going to actually kind of stretch it the other way, is 2.84. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change the width to 2.84. And you can see that that is what it looks like now on the cup. And I guarantee you that it will not look like that when you engrave it. It will actually look more like a circle. And that's because we're kind of counteracting that parallax effect that happens when you do circular logos on cylindrical cups. Hope that was eye-opening for you. I encourage you to try that the next time you get a circle logo and see what a difference it makes. Let's move on to our final tip. All right, so my last tip on tumbler engraving has to do with putting names on tumblers. So you can get kind of tripped up on this if you haven't done this before, or be tempted to fill up the space that you have on a tumbler with different names. And when you get an order for 25, 50, 100 cups and you need to put a name on the back of each cup, you want to make sure that the name is bold and proud, but also not constantly changing size as the names get longer or shorter. But you want to utilize that 2.85 inch area that we've kind of decided is our maximum width on the cup. So here's how I do it. There's probably other ways to do it with different programs. I'm using Adobe Illustrator, but this is a quick way that I use on how to size names appropriately, especially if I have a big long list of names and not using variable text feature or constant text. What I have here is I have my little representation of the area that I am allowed to work in on the cup, and that's a width of 2.85 inches. That's the max that I am choosing to go on this particular tumbler and a lot of other tumblers. And then I have a list of names that I typed out and turned into vectors. What I'm paying attention to here is I know that Christopher and Alexander and Annalise are not going to fit in 2.85 inches. But I also know that at this size, if I take Rob and I float him over there, he doesn't quite fill up this whole space, and I don't want to base the rest of the names off of Rob because it's a really short name. So what I'm looking for, and I hope this is coming across well because it works for me and it may take you a second to play with this, is I'm looking for the average length name in this list of names. I'm not looking for the longest or the shortest or the medium. I'm looking for the average length name. And there's a lot of ways that you could figure this out. You can, we did a little experiment earlier where we counted all the characters and all the names and then divided that by the list of names. And it came out with the average length name or characters being Jessica. But we found, and that's true. So the average length of the name in this list is Jessica or Thomas. They're both really, really close. So what I would do is I would grab all of these names and I would bring Thomas over there. Doesn't matter what size, because remember, we're going to be basing this. Say if you started with a character size like this, I would bring over the average name, size name in the list, no matter how long it is. And I would bring Thomas still grouped all together, and I would holding down and constraining my, I'm never gonna stretch the text out to fit in that area. Never gonna do that. But I would slowly start to look at Thomas as it's floating over my maximum area. And I'm just slowly sizing. You notice I'm changing the size of all the names at once. And now, as you can see, Thomas is fitting within our 2.85 inches pretty much perfectly. It's a little off, and now let's look at our list. So now if we take this, let's just change this for fun to silver, right? Now, if we look at most of the names on this list, most of them, like Susan, Rob, Steve, Jessica, Thomas, which we know is 2.85 inches. It's not going to go over. Jessica's going to be a little under. Everybody is fitting on that cup really, really nice. And that's the way I like to size my names. Now, what do we do for names like Michael and Alexander and Christopher and Annalise, right? Well, what did we just do? We can also take those as well and find the kind of not the smallest, not the longest, but kind of the average. So that would be Alexander. So let's size Alexander and see what we come up with. So Alexander fits in there now. Christopher's a little bit over, but Annalise fits in there really nice, right? So now we've got Michael, Alexander, Christopher. He's a little bit over, and I would just let that go. I'm not going to be that precise. And Annalise fits really nice. There's nothing you can do. You have to shrink long names down, but don't shrink them down so small. Try to utilize the space that you have, and I think that's good. So that would now be the list of names that I would use for all these cups. And I hope that is what I find an easy way to size a big list of names for when I'm engraving on cups. There's other software out there where you can keep constant height and bounding boxes and keep it all inside there. But since I like to work with vectors, this is how I do it. All right, so that wraps up my Illustrator digital tips on how to prepare artwork, how to adjust circle logos, how to make sure that logos are engraving correctly by inverting them when you need to, and also how to create proofs for your customers. And with that, I think we need to move on to the next step. Let's get back over to the laser. All right, so I guess this wouldn't really be a masterclass if I didn't really cover the basics and show you just how simple it is to put in the rotary tool into your Epilog Edge or any other unit. You're going to make sure that your table is dropped all the way down on your edge, and you're going to take your rotary tool, you're going to place it down in the bed carefully, and you're going to corner it up on the left-hand side and make sure that it's nice and flush in there. And you notice the machine is not on right now. So that's very important that you do this while the machine is not on. And then if you can see over here, there's a serial cable. You're just going to plug that in. And now it's safe to turn on your machine. Voila. So now that we've got the rotary in, let's engrave our first cup. So the engraving method that I'm going to show you in this masterclass today is called the center method. I don't like using the build a page that represents the full circumference and height and width of my cup because I find that's excessive, and I would have to make different page sizes for all these different cups, where center method is just quicker, it's easier to set up, and with a ruler and using your red laser, it's very easy to set the location where you want to put the logo. If you're going to be doing a logo on the front and on the back of a cup that doesn't have any brand markings on it, like a lot of the JDS tumblers or tumblers from MakerFlow, then it makes sense to use the page setup where you build a page in your software that represents the height of the cup and the circumference of the cup. That makes sense because then you can do a logo on the front and the back and set those up on the page. But for everyday engraving or all the different types of engravings that I do here in my business, I really rarely ever use that method, and I use center. So that's what I'm going to show you today. Let's go ahead and get our first cup loaded in, and I'll show you how to do it. So we're just going to set our tumbler in there, use the lip clamp, sorry, I had to say it again. We made our back adjustment. The cup is not level yet. I'm going to go ahead and set my level on there. We're going to get the cup level. We're going to grab our focal tool that comes with the edge. I have one for the 2-inch lens and one for the 4-inch lens. I'm just going to set that right there. I'm going to drop the table down. This right here is your raise and lower your Z-axis. And to do this 30-ounce tumbler, since it's pretty wide, I have to drop my table down on the edge all the way to the bottom. Next, I'm going to jog over, and you notice I have my red laser turned on. Okay, that's so I can find where I'm going to land my logo, which is going to be right in the middle of here, where the paint stops right there, or roughly right in there. And you notice I'm not focused yet. So I still need to focus to the cup because you can see this little focal tool is not focused yet, but we're gonna focus right now. I'm gonna select the raise and lower the Z-axis, and I'm just gonna raise it up until my cup touches that pin. And now we're in focus. So now you can see that the pin is touching the surface of the cup, and I can remove my focal tool and set it right back there. So now we're in focus. What do we need to do next? You're going to know the height and the width of your graphic because, well, you've already decided that in your art graphic design software, so you know that. And it's going to be really helpful to have yourself a small little flexible ruler. This is one of my favorite rulers from JDS because it helps me when using the center method. First of all, by using the ruler, I can find out that the distance between where the paint ends and where I want to stop is about 3.5 inches. And I want to engrave right in the middle of that area, which is 1.75. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit the jog feature, and I'm going to move my red laser to 1.75, which is about right there. And now that I've got my red laser pointing in between here and here, I can remove the ruler, and I can come over here to the control panel and hit centering point. So once again, the step is moving the red dot laser over, then using the joystick command, using the jog wheel, and then locking in the center point. And what that means for you, that will be the center of where your graphic will engrave on the cup every single time. So regardless of how high your graphic is or how wide, the very center of that graphic is going to engrave right where you told it to on the cup. All right, so now that we've covered how to do center on the Epilog and how I set up my cups using that method, I want to just take a second to talk about airflow and air assist. On every Epilog, you need to have some kind of air assist. There's lots of different compressors out there that you can get, but what I find to be very crucial is that you need to be able to have an air compressor where you can adjust your airflow on the fly. You don't always need to be blasting 30 psi of air for every single laser engraving job. In fact, I only use 30 psi or 25 to 30 when I'm laser cutting. I never use that amount of air when I'm engraving anything because I find that it creates more soot and creates more of a mess. So when I'm engraving cups or when I'm engraving anything really, I keep my air assist at a very minimum air pressure, about 5 psi, just enough to blow any particulates away from the lens. So that's just a little tip from me to you. Let's go over to the Epilog Job Manager and CorelDRAW, and I'll show you how to set up the file. I'm going to be using CorelDRAW and of course the Epilog Job Manager, that is the laser controller. And I've got a little sample graphic in here, as you can see. And here's how it's going to come in. You'll notice that my workspace is 12 by 24, which is what this model is. It's the 12 by 24. I've got my vector loaded in here, and I tried to size it over at my computer at Adobe Illustrator to about the size that I need it. This is a pretty big cup, so 3 inches wide. I could even change that to 2.85 inches wide. Make sure you have your ratio locked like I just didn't. And we can change the width to 2.85. I find that even up to 30-ounce tumblers, I rarely make a graphic that is wider than 3 inches. 2.85 width is usually the standard. You're going to load in your vector graphic, and then because of the orientation that we have our rotary, we're going to go up here and we're going to turn it 90 degrees. That is the orientation that the cup is laying in the machine, so we're going to make sure that we turn it that way. If I was doing the sports bottle that we showed over at the table earlier and I had it flipped the other way, I would change it -90 the other way. But now that we've got the graphic orientated and we've got it sized correctly, we're just going to send it over in Corel, hit print, and it's going to show up in the Epilog dashboard here. So now that it's in here, if I didn't have this on a very specific setting, you would see the camera, and that is not the right setting for using center engraving. So it's very important that you go to advance and you need to set this on center. And that is the proper way to set up the Epilog dashboard so you can do center engraving. Because we're using center, it doesn't matter where I put this graphic. It could be up here, it could be over here, it could be over here, because remember, we set the centering point using the red laser and the laser to control where we wanted the engraving. So it really doesn't matter. Just wanted to make that clear. So back over to the manager, you can see that our red laser center. Now, let's talk about settings. Over here, I've got a setting. This is a 60 watt RF tube CO₂ laser. And the setting that I built that is for all powdered coated tumblers that I use. It doesn't matter what brand, is this setting right here. I've got a resolution of 400. I've got a speed of 25. I'm using maximum power, and I'm not using any dithering whatsoever. And the direction button right here, you can choose which direction you want it to start engraving. So if you choose down, it's going to rotate one way, and then it's going to work back this way. If you choose up, it's going to start over here and rotate that way. That can come in handy if you have something with handles that might get in the way of which way you want to engrave. I just want to point out also that there is a very specific reason why I chose this setting. It's because what I did was I took the brand that had the thickest level of powder coat that they could possibly put on there, and I based my setting off of that. So that way I knew that any tumbler I threw in there, the laser would always go through the coating no matter what. So you want to try to build a setting for your powder coated tumblers that will blast through the thickest of the thickest powder coated tumbler, and then that is your master setting that you use on every single tumbler from then on out. That way you're not like, ooh, you know, you ever have to wonder if you're going to get all the way through on the first try. So now that we've set all those things up, we're on center. We're going to go ahead and print, and it's going to send it over to the machine, and we're going to verify
In doubt, pinky out.
here on the control panel that this logo is in here. We're good. You could, if you wanted to, hit the framing feature. If you're unsure, there's a little feature right here called the framing feature, and it will show you where it's going to land. You see how it's boxing out where the graphic's going to go? And you can unframe there. And now that you're done framing, it will go back to its original position. If you want to make an adjustment, you could. Like I saw in that framing, I wanted it to be a little bit higher. So I moved the centering point up just a little bit, and now I could hit frame again. And I'm a little bit higher. I like that location. I'm gonna stop framing. I'm gonna close the door, turn on the fume extractor from our friends over at FilterBox Micro. Shameless plug, I love FilterBox Micro. Now that we got our fume extractor on, it's time to let the magic happen. Let's go ahead and grade this cup. Now, one of the things you probably notice is a bunch of soot, and it looks like burn marks around the edges of the engraving. And the more I turn down the air assist, if I turn it all the way up, it extinguishes the flame. But if I turn it down, you get a little bit more flames. So the air assist can dramatically affect the soot, but don't worry, we'll clean all that up. Here's the coolest part. This is one of the things I love about this, is the Epilog control panel gives you an estimated time that it thinks it's going to need to get the job done. It estimated 3 minutes, but the coolest thing about this is that this was actually done in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Very impressive. So now that that's completed, we're gonna take this out, and boy, doesn't that look like crap. That's okay. Most of that is just the air assist blowing the soot around. And what I've noticed is with different types of paint and powder coating on different tumblers and different brands, you will get more or less soot. It also does have to do with the air assist, but usually this is like you get a lot of soot on white paints, you get a lot of soot on lighter colored paints, but not so much on certain colors. I never worry about this when I see it. I know that the laser went all the way through, and now let's go ahead and give it a little clean off. We're gonna talk about cleaning off these cups a little bit later in the video, but for right now, we'll just quickly clean this one off. You can just spray a little LA's Totally Awesome on there, and a little microfiber cloth, and it just wipes right off. Sometimes you can even just put it right on here. You really need to give it a good scrub. That's really nice. So don't be scared. If you use the right setting, you'll always have a nice clean engraving in the end, even if it looks like crap when it comes out. That's normal. It's okay. You've got to clean off every single cup. All right, so now that we've got one of the tumblers out of the way, let's go ahead and tackle some glassware. And we'll do something with a handle. So what do we have to do first? We've got to take off those second set of drive wheels. So let's do that. All right, we'll get our mug, set that in here, drop this down. It's a little too high. And we'll take our spirit level, and we'll make sure that that tumbler is level. Or that's not a tumbler, it's a beer mug. Next, we're going to take our focal tool, gonna hang that there, and I'm gonna use the Z-axis adjustment to bring the glass up until it touches the focal tool. All right, so now we're in focus. And we need to adjust our position of where we want our logo to be. We're gonna use the same Epilog logo. Don't think I needed to be as wide as the giant tumbler that we just did. So I think that probably, using this ruler again, I'm gonna say 2.25 is acceptable. So I'll change that over in CorelDRAW before we send it over. So if I change that graphic to 2.25, my new height is 2.22. If we know our graphic is 2.22, then half of that is 1.1. So if I put the graphic right here, I know that the bottom of the graphic is going to be at 2.22. And that's a little bit low for me. I think I want to go a little bit higher. So I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to hit my new centering point. And that is my new centering point right there. And I know that the bottom of my graphic will not go past 2.2 inches right there. So I've locked that in. Now, the other thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing mugs like this is you want to figure out where is the center between the handle, because when they're holding it, you want them to be in the center. right? One of the things you can do that's pretty cool is you can actually take your spirit level and turn this in there until I'm holding the spirit level flush on the handle and it's level. So that should be about the center of the glass right there. So I'm using the same graphic here that we used on the 30-ounce cup, but there's something really important that we have to do when we're engraving glass. We want to change this over here on the right-hand side in Corel, or whatever your art program is. If you're using Adobe Illustrator Direct, you want to change this to 80% gray. And this helps with the glass engraving on the Epilog. So now that we've changed it to 80% gray, we're going to go ahead and send this over to the Epilog dashboard. We've got our graphic in here. We sized it appropriately for the mug, and I'm going to go ahead and pick my glass setting that I like to use. And I want you to pay attention to these settings. So I've got a resolution of 400. I've got a speed of 20. My power is at 85%, and I'm using a dithering pattern, which is Jarvis. So I'm going to go ahead and send that over, and we'll see how that turns out. Well, that came out lovely. There we go. This actually came out really nice, but one of the little tricks I like to do is if you ever get an engraving that comes out with a little bit of flakage on it, this one actually feels really, really smooth. You can take a magic eraser with a little bit of moisture on it, and you can just give it a rub like that, and that'll get off any little flakes so it feels a little bit smoother. I really like doing that, especially if I'm getting a type of glass or a cheap glass that has some flakage, even with my best setting. It really helps give it a smooth finish before delivering to the customer. But you notice when you get it wet, it kind of disappears. But when that dries again, it'll be a really nice frosted white. I'll show you that at the end of the video. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I just realized that I told you guys that I was going to give you some tips on engraving glass. And since we're about to do this wine glass, this is the perfect time. So here's some tips on engraving glass with an Epilog CO₂ laser, or any CO₂ laser for that matter. Some of the tips that I've talked about in my other videos, and I'll tell you now, is that the cheaper the glass, the better it engraves. Yes, I know that sounds ridiculous, but because of the different minerals and things that they put into cheap glass, it actually engraves the best with a CO₂ laser. And you need to pay attention to the thickness of the glass that you're about to engrave. CO₂ lasers don't really do a good job at engraving ultra thin, high-end glass like Riedel glasses. You're probably going to shatter the glass, so I try to avoid those in my shop at all costs. Even those thin glasses still struggle even with something like a UV laser. So try to stick with standard thickness glasses like whiskey glasses, standard wine glasses, and try to avoid ultra thin high-end glasses. The other thing that you need to understand is that we're not actually engraving the glass. What we're doing is we're microfracturing the surface of the glass to create a frosted look or illusion. So there's actually not any material that's being removed. Third tip, getting good engraving on glass comes down to a few things. Obviously, it comes down to having a great setting, which you can see here on my screen. You can use my settings if you have a 60-watt edge like I do, and you might have to adjust if you have a higher power or lower power laser source. The other thing that comes down to it is heat dispersion. Most of the time when you're getting flaking and chipping, or what I call splash damage on your glass engraving, it's because you're probably running too much heat. And there's a couple ways you can control that. Obviously, if you dial in the perfect setting, most of the time you don't need to use any of these methods, but if you're struggling, here's a few tips. Try wetting with a spray bottle a little paper towel and placing it over the glass before you engrave. Yes, you can engrave right through that wet paper towel, and it actually helps cool the glass which stops chipping and flaking, which can yield you a flake-free, really nice frosted engraving. The other thing you can do is you can get some Dawn dish soap, and with your finger, you can just rub that right on the surface of the glass, just a thin layer over the glass and engrave right through that, and that also helps cool the temperature and the engraving area. And last but not least, dialing in a perfect setting using some nice dithering patterns, using the right DPI, you can find the perfect setting that will work for about 80% of the glass that will come your way. And most of the time, you won't need those other methods, but if you do, those are the ways to get nice, smooth, frosted engravings on glass, because the last thing you want to do is deliver a chippy, flaky engraving on glass to your customer. So I hope that helps. Let's get back to engraving the rest of these cups. So before we engrave the rest of these cups and do a little montage for you, there's one little tip that I wanted to point out. Sometimes you're going to get customer supplied cups that already have existing embossing on them, like this RTIC cup or a Yeti cup. And you're going to need to center the logo that they want on their cup with the existing embossed logo from the brand. And using the center method, it's very easy to align your logo up with the center of their logo. And I'm going to show you how to do it real quick. First thing you need to do is you're going to want to measure out the total width of the brand's existing logo. This one is 1.8 inches. And then you're going to want to split that in half, divided by 2, which is 0.9. So now we know that the center of this graphic right here on these cups is at 0.9, which is right there. So it's basically a little bit in from the T right there. If I put this right there, you can see that 0.9 is almost to the part where the T turns on the graphic. It's just a little bit in, and that's where I'm going to center to. So let's go ahead and put it in the Epilog, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're gonna set our cup in here. I've already got this focused and set up and level. And if I need to put my graphic right here and it needs to be perfectly aligned with this graphic here, and we're using the center method, we're going to use the jog. Keep in mind, I've already got my graphic loaded in here. We're going to use the jog feature on the control panel on the Epilog, and we're going to bring our red laser, and we're just going to manually turn the cup until we get that red laser on the point where we know is the center of whatever the graphic is, whatever brand it is down here. You have to know the center of the existing mark and where to put that red laser. Once that red laser is on the center mark, we're just going to come over here to the control panel, because remember, we jogged over there, and we're going to click Park Axis. And what did that do? That put our position right back to where we're going to engrave. Look, I'll do it again. We'll use the jog feature to come over. I'm jogging over to the graphic that I need to get centered to. I'm putting it in position. When I have the position centered on the existing graphic on the cup, I'm going to click Park Axis, and it's going to go right back to our center position. And that's how you align to customer supplied cups or any cups that come with branding already on them where you need to be centered. Next, I wanted to talk about workspace efficiency. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So when you're working at your laser and you're doing particularly batch engraving of cups, it's really important to keep in mind to stay as efficient as possible, because as I've said in my other videos, time is money, and you don't want to be walking all around the shop to get things and then come back to the laser. So let me tell you what I mean by that. If you're standing in front of your laser, I find it very helpful to set up some either portable workstations, 6-foot tables. And what you can do is on one table, you can have all your, say, JDS cups that you got, your case of 24 open, and you've taken all the lids off ahead of time and put them in a box. So you've got those on one side. Then on the other side, you've got an empty table where as you pull the cup out, you're going to set that on the empty table. This is all within arm's reach of where you're working. Try to bring every everything close to you that you're going to need to complete the job. That way you're not walking all around the shop, wasting time, or like I've done in the past, working on the floor and then bringing it back up. It's really helpful to have a few folding tables in the shop for these large batch jobs that you're going to get. So you take the cup out, you put it in the machine, it's done engraving, you take that out, you set it on the done table. Now, when you have all your engraved cups over on the done table, what do we have to do next? We have to clean the cup off with some LA's Totally Awesome and a rag. So behind you on another table, you almost kind of boxed yourself in like a little fence. Behind you, you have your cleaning station. So that's where you're gonna have your cleaning products, your rag. You're gonna clean the cup off, and you're gonna turn right back around to where you started and place that finished cup back in, grab the lid out of the box that you took off before you started the job, put it on there, close that box back up, and that is probably the most efficient way that you can work when it comes to batch engraving large volumes of cups. Now, I understand not every cup or case of cups is gonna come like JDS comes, but you can still set up the packaging close to you and set up all your other stations really close. Next, I wanted to talk about packaging a little bit more. So when you have a customer-centric based laser engraving business like I do, sometimes, in fact, a lot of the times, the customer was going to want to bring you their cups that they purchased elsewhere. And sometimes during the holidays, those can be 100 cups, 200 cups, Stanley's, RTIC cups. Any kind of brand you can think of might come through your door because they have a very specific type of cup that they want to bring you, and they don't want to use anything that you can get from your distributors, and that's fine. But I want you to keep in mind that a lot of these store-bought cups and these higher brand name cups come with excessive packaging that you need to consider before quoting a price per cup for those jobs. So keep this in mind. When you get Yeti cups, maybe drop shipped right to your shop, those things are gonna come with tissue paper around them, paper bands, stickers on the inside, all kinds of wham whizzle stuff that's just absolutely a nightmare to unpack and then deal with. In fact, it takes you most of the time with most of these high-end brands longer to unpack each one of those cups than it does to actually design and engrave the cup, clean it off, and put it back. What I'm saying is make sure that you keep that in mind when you're taking on these jobs and factor that in to the price of your engraving work. It's very important that you factor in packing and unpacking of these customer supplied cups when you're doing these jobs. All right, well, that was fun engraving all those cups, and now we have the glorious duty of cleaning them up. That's right, when these powder-coated tumblers, almost all different brands come out of any kind of CO2 laser, you're always gonna have cleanup. But don't worry, it's not that bad. It's pretty easy and it can be quick. Certain powder coats will have more soot than other ones. Like I said, air assist plays a big role in that. I have another older Epilog here that doesn't have direct air assist and a nozzle. So when it engraves, you almost see no soot. So keep that in mind. But because all the new models have nozzles and direct air assist, just like the Fusion Edge does, we're gonna go ahead and need to clean this off. So a couple of things you're gonna need. LA's Totally Awesome. I buy it in bulk and I put it in a nicer spray bottle because I don't like the spray bottle that it comes in. So we have some LA's Totally Awesome. And for those stubborn stains, I like to use a product called methanol. See if we need that or not on any of these cups. So here's how we clean it up. So we'll start with the white one first, and you can just spray a little bit right on your microfiber cloth, get it kind of soaked a little bit. And I don't usually clean cups here at my table, but I'm doing this just for you. So here we go. We're just gonna give that a little bit of a wipe off and magic, just like that. Let's keep going. Let's try this Maker Flow Chroma electroplated skinny tumbler that we did. This one's got quite a bit on it. You could probably even use the LA's Totally Awesome that's still left from the last one. Let's see if we can get away with it. Look at that. Boom. I love these electroplated cups. They come out really nice. I don't know if you guys can see that. Doesn't that look sick? That's nice. So interestingly enough, when we talked earlier about how to use the rotary and how to set different cups up, I had this blemish Stanley laying around and it already had an engraving right here, but I figured, you know, we got to engrave it anyways. But what I actually had was an actual job for a customer. So we're going to clean that off too. So we put a little bit on there, going to give that a wipe off. Now you will notice the powder coating types that have the hardest time coming off are sometimes blue powder coating and also red powder coating. You might think that you didn't get all the way through it and you see a blue tint on there. So you have to scrub a little bit harder when it comes to blue powder coating. I've noticed that over the years. So far we haven't needed any methanol, which is great. And then here we've got the actual customer Stanley. And see what I mean about that red? Like I'm still got to spray a little bit more on. You can see it come off on there, but that's all right. Just got to put some elbow grease into it. Perfect. That's what I'm talking about. And there we go on that one. See, you can see doing a batch run process like this. I actually used to take these all over to the sink, spray them with LA's Totally Awesome, rinse them off, use a toothbrush. I mean, that's just how I started doing it. And then when I realized that this is actually strong enough to just wipe it away, if you get through all the powder coating on the first run and you dial in that setting, you shouldn't have to do any of that stuff. You can just do a wipe off and you should be good to go. This one we already wiped off. This one came out really nice. And let's talk really quickly about post glass cleanup. Like I said, you don't really need to spray or clean glass, but if you're finding that your engraving is not smooth, boy, that's real smooth. And it's a little chippy, you can always take a damp magic eraser and just rub it to get any of those little chips that you might feel on there because you don't want to give that to your customer. But these came out really, really nice. We wiped these off. The only one that I'm not gonna do at the table is this full wrap that we did. It definitely needs some cleaning, but when I'm doing a full wrap clean off like this, you definitely probably wanna do this over the sink. And for this one, I'm not gonna just spray it on the rag. I'm actually gonna spray the whole cup and let it drip off of there. So why don't we go and do that right now, and then we'll come back and I'll share some bonus tips with you about aligning logos on cups, and then we'll do a wrap up. All right, let's go over to the shop sink. It's pretty messy, but that's why it's called the shop sink. All right, so when you got a bunch of cups like this or a lot of engraving, you definitely want to do this over the sink. So what I do is I just spray it directly onto there, let all that, it's just literally coming off. Like I'm barely gonna have to wipe it off. There we go. This graphite cup, this graphite looking cup is so cool. This is a JDS tumbler. Man, that looks so cool. And then if you want, because we used a lot of cleaner, I might actually give it a rinse off just to get some of that cleaner off of there. There we go. Man, that came out super cool. All that detail was actually at, I believe, 300 DPI. It's crazy what 300 DPI can get for the detail on there. I used to use 400 DPI, but when you use 300, I just wanted to point out you can still get a lot of excellent, excellent detail on that. Came out really nice. All right, let's go do some tips. All right, here are some bonus tips for aligning your graphic to cups before we get to the wrap up here. So here's the tools that we use all the time here in the shop for this. This is just how I do it. There's probably other ways to do it out there, but this is what we came up with. So here's the scenario. You've got a customer brings you a bunch of cups, or you have a bunch of cups that have an existing logo. And I'm just using this as an example. So say a customer brought me these cups, they already had a logo here, and all they want me to do is put a name on the other side, directly on the opposite side of the logo. What I'm about to show you is also relevant for blank Yeti cups or RTIC cups or any cup that has an existing embossment or a logo that you need to register whatever you're engraving on right in line with that, because you definitely want to do that, and that's the professional way to do it. So how do we do that here in the shop? If I've got to put a name on the other side, and remember, this is a method that we use when we're doing center engraving. Just wanted to clarify that. All right, so you've got the cup that the customer brought you. It's got an existing logo. Your job is to put names on the back. Definitely want to make sure that that is aligned on the opposite side right here. So the first thing you have to do is you have to know the width of the existing mark on the other side. So we measured this ahead of time. You're going to want a flexible ruler, and we found that it's 3 inches. So holding that ruler there, right, for the width of the logo, we know that half of 3 is 1.5, and that lands right in the middle of that G in Epilog right there, okay? So that we know is our center point of the logo. Now, I'm not going to take full credit for this. This is actually one of my employees that came up with this. So Ren, nice job. What we like to do here is, now that we've established where the center of the existing logo is, we take one of these little ball chains, right? A long one, because, you know, we got to work on tall cups. And we just drape it right in front to where the chain is hanging out. And I got to look at what I'm doing here. Right over the G. I got to stand up to this. We actually do this. So if we have a batch of cups, we actually do this for every single cup because we have to make the mark. We make sure it's draped right down the center of the G, and then we look at the top and make sure we're split evenly on either side of the cup. We know that the center logo, and it has to be a ball chain, so it's kind of heavy. Our center point on the other side of the cup with a dry erase marker on the lip of the cup, which totally wipes off, we put a mark right there. So now when we put the cup in on the other side, we know that our center mark is right there. And we bring our red laser over, and if the cup's not seated properly, we manually turn the cup until the red laser, and then we jog back to our center point, and our name will land exactly on the other side of the cup. So grab your chain, get all your cups out, do the alignment, make your mark all the cups, and then we do the whole batch of cups. So there is a little tip on how to quickly find the center mark on the opposite side of a cup for any logo that you need to register on the opposite side. This dry erase marker is your best friend. Have a dry erase marker in your shop. It's great for marking the center on anything. Another reason you would want to use it is you would want to figure out where the center of the Stanley is when a right-handed person is holding it, like we did here. By the way, it's on a 30 ounce, it's 2.5 inches from the outside of the handle. Just tell you that. Bonus tip, made a year. Anyway, so you want to make sure that it's centered. And then what I did was I put a little dry erase mark once I measured 2.5 in, so I knew where to land my engraving. One other tip I wanted to bring you here at my masterclass is we didn't really get around to doing this, but you notice this has no powder coating on it. And sometimes you may want to sell, or a customer may bring you raw stainless steel tumblers like this, and you can engrave them with the CO₂ laser or laser etch them with the CO₂ laser, but you're going to need some kind of laser marking spray. I like to use Brilliance laser marking spray for many years now, but you can also use like Ceramark or other laser marking sprays. And all you do is put a thin coat and then let that dry, set it in your rotary, and engrave your logo right on the stainless steel, and then wash it off, and you'll have a very rich, defined black laser etching on stainless steel. So that's your solution for that. Whew! That was a lot of information. I hope that every single one of you got some nugget of value out of all the different information that we shared here on this masterclass today. It's really fun for me to share all the different ways that I like to engrave cups here in my shop, and I hope that some of that information can help you be more efficient when it comes to batch engraving tumblers, single engraving on tumblers or wine glasses or whatever it is, to make sure that you're working efficiently, fast, and getting that product returned out the door to the customer, so you can free up your lasers to make more money when the next customer brings you tumblers. Tumblers and drinkware are a fantastic way to make money in any laser engraving business. They have been around. I mean, I've been doing this for over a decade, so I can confidently say that this is an evergreen product that any laser engraving business should get into doing and offering their customers. It's not a fad, not going out of style. It should be a staple in any laser engraving business. I think I said that like 3 times. So if you got that, get it. That's start engraving cups. Now, of course, we were working on the Fusion Edge 60 watt today, and I just want to point out a couple of things about how amazing that machine is. So it's a 60 watt. It is so fast. All these run times, I mean, I'm just going to roughly break down. So the run time on this one was about, I don't know, 1 minute and 50 seconds. The run time on this one was about the same. All of these were almost right under 2 minutes or just over 2 minutes. Just absolutely ridiculous, blazing fast speeds. And that's because of the Epilog, the way they use their servos and not steppers. And also, more importantly, they have the Epilog RF tube them, which allows the machine to run at maximum speed for maximum output. And that's one of the reasons why I have chosen Epilog over the years, is because of how fast and reliable they are, but mostly fast. This tumbler, believe it or not, this 20-ounce tumbler took 14 minutes to do. Now, I know that seems like a long time, but if you compare that to all the other desktop or, lower tiered CO₂ lasers out there, I think you'll realize that 14 minutes to do a full wrap tumbler like this is pretty impressive. Well, I think that about wraps it up. I want to thank Epilog for inviting me to come and give you this masterclass. I hope that everyone got some value out of this. You got some new ideas, some refreshments on old ideas. Whatever it is that you got, my goal is to bring you as much value as possible. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time over at Laser Engraving 911.